Hello, friends. Today I wanted to talk about Standard. I wanted to briefly talk about the metagame, the BNR announcement, and of course, uh, Dragons of Tarkir, or excuse me, it's Tarkir Dragonstorm. Um, and mainly, I saw Brian Kibler's video about what he thinks should be banned, and I wanted to kind of give my insight on that discussion. I play a lot of Standard. I spend countless hours playing Standard. Really, I would even say Standard is my format. I play it more than any other format except for maybe Draft. So between Standard and Draft, like those are my two uh, primary formats. And currently in Standard, we just had the BNR announcement a couple days ago, and I've had some time to think about it. And they made no changes to Standard. They're sticking to their guns. They're going to make a ban announcement, after Dragons of Tarkir and Final Fantasy comes out, I think. So that's when we'll start to see some actual bans come through, which, I understand we have a new set coming out. It's probably going to shake up the meta at least a little bit. Looking at Dragons of Tarkir, I have a couple cards that I think will help shake up the meta, but I think for the most part, the top decks are going to remain fairly unchanged. Specifically, what I want to talk about is the mono red deck, which is running around. I would argue that's the deck to beat in Standard. If your deck isn't equipped to beat mono red or Gruul or Boros mice, then your deck is probably not going to do very well on the ladder at all in Standard. So that's like kind of the deck to beat. Here's the thing about Monstrous Rage. So the two cards that Kibler wants, taken out of the format, which I don't disagree with, are Monstrous Rage and Up the Beanstalk. Now, I want to make a case against these arguments. And I don't think that these are bad choices for bans, by the way. I think that these would shake up the meta a little bit. But the thing is with the mice package is I think that even if you ban Monstrous Rage, the mice package will be unimpacted by banning Monstrous Rage. Specifically because the mice themselves are so powerful and they get pumped so quickly. Like Rage is just kind of like icing on top of the cake. The real problem is that these mice from Bloomburrow are very, very powerful when you target them with your own abilities. The Emberheart Challenger, for example, the 2-drop that basically draws you a card when you target it, combined with Manifold Mouse, it's just really it's such a powerful synergy. It's so hard to interact with. The fact that you can modality give it double strike or trample depending on the situation, both of those modes are incredibly good. And then later in the game, when you draw Manifold Mouse, you basically get both modes for free for 4 mana, and you have 2 extra bodies. Heartfire Hero is also just one of the best 1-drops they've ever printed, combined with the other mice and lizards specifically in Bloomburrow. So the lizard, the 1-drop lizard that attacks and deals 1 damage, and also you can pump it for 2 mana. That's huge. It triggers when other lizards attack. So if you just draw like 4 lizards in your opening, that's an insane opening that you just like dealing a ton of direct damage to your opponent's face. Combined with the lands as well. The problem is that whole set, they've made some of the most powerful early game creatures we've ever seen, not even just in Standard, but like even in Pioneer. These creatures are just so powerful. And again, you combine it with the lands that give them haste, and it feels like even if you've done a really good job of playing a control deck and dealing with the board, all of a sudden they have these lands that can just give their creatures haste. And also, in addition, because they have that ability of pumping themselves and getting these extra effects when you pump them, it just snowballs. Even on an empty board, you can be at like 10 life, and then out of nowhere, you can just die to these creatures, combined with Monstrous Rage. So I don't actually think that Monstrous Rage is the real problem here. I think it will help. It'll mean that you die on turn 3 a lot less, or turn 2 in some situations. But we have plenty of other pump spells in Standard that pump for a similar amount and have similar effects. It's not as good as giving Trample. But again, if you pump up Heartfire Hero and you make it like a 7/4, or you make it like a 9/5 or something, yeah, it doesn't really matter that it has Trample at that point. It's going to swing in, it's going to die, it's going to deal 9 damage to your face every time. We have Callous Sellsword in the format. So again, it's one of these things where, yeah, it might make a marginal difference, but I think overall it's actually not going to impact the mono red deck in the meta in any substantial way. Mono red's still going to be the most prevalent deck in the format, simply because the mice and the early game drops for Standard in red are so powerful. And on top of that, they actually have a really good sideboard plan. If they're playing Gruul, they have a bunch of enchantment hate that they can slot in. But even just if they stay mono red, you can bring in Sunfire Links, which just immediately demolishes anything that is playing a bunch of non-basics. It makes your opponents unable to gain life. It's a 5/4 beater, so if they don't have an answer right away, it just ETBs, deals a ton of damage, and then on top of that, it has all these other effects. So realistically, like, I just don't think that banning Monstrous Rage is going to do anything to this deck. That is my take. If I had a choice for bans specifically, I honestly would ban the mice package. I would ban something out of the package. Maybe Manifold Mouse is the most problematic card out of the bunch. Heartfire Hero and Emberheart Challenger both kind of require other pieces to do something. But even then, they're still really good. They exile, like if you have an exile-based removal, for example, Ride's End or something, then they're a lot easier to manage. Usually Ride's End is a great answer to dealing with the mono red deck. Like if you drew 4 Ride's End, you're pretty much set. Like you're not really going to die most of the time. But even then, sometimes, like I said, because of Manifold Mouse giving double strike and a bunch of other keywords, it just makes it really hard to even not die on those board states where you did draw all 4 of your Ride's Ends. So that's my take on the ban situation for Standard. They need to remove something from the mice package and really dismantle it in a way to shine for other red cards, because realistically, as long as these mice are legal in Standard, you're just going to see them until they get rotated out. That's my take. You can ban Monstrous Rage, you can ban all these other pump spells, you can ban Leyline. It has not impacted this deck in any way because the mice are so good. It just makes them very, very difficult to deal with. And it also makes the format less fun overall because you are having to build around this deck. So no matter what your deck is doing, you have to figure out how to deal with mice. And if you don't have an answer for the mice deck, your deck just is mediocre. You're going to get steamrolled by this deck. So that's kind of where Standard is at. Now I want to shift to the topic of beans, because of course, you know, the opinion, I guess, is that if you ban Monstrous Rage or dismantle the mice deck in some way, beans is going to take over the format. I actually don't think that's the case. I actually think beans is a totally fine card in Standard. I'm not going to argue that it's not a very powerful card. I think beans is an incredibly strong card, obviously, and the decks that run beans usually can steamroll the game if they get the beans thing going. But the thing with beans is that if your opponent interacts with it, they have a lot more opportunities to come back in that game. And beans oftentimes will, steamroll the game. Like if it sits around on turn 2, turn 3 you play your Overlord of the Hauntwoods, turn 4 you play Zur, right? Like that's a pretty brutal opening. It's very hard to deal with, and at that point you're pretty set up to just win the game. You got a ton of lands, you have a billion cards in your hand, and it's really hard to lose in that situation. That being said, these are pieces that can be interacted with individually. You're not like by the time that deck wins, it's like turn 5, it's like turn 6. So you have all these opportunities to interact with the beans, with the Overlord, with the Zur, you have these opportunities to get in there and at least stop what's going on. But that's not the case with the red deck. The red deck is kind of like, okay, did they draw all of their good 1-drops and 2-drops? Oh yeah, and then they also have Rage. Oh yeah, they also have Burst Lightning. Oh yeah, they also have Witchstalker Frenzy. So if you happen to play blockers that are actually good, they can just plow through those. My point is that the red deck is so effective at doing what it does and getting in the face every single turn. It's like a single ban is not going to hurt this deck in any way. It's kind of like the energy deck in Modern, where you have all these cards that generate energy. Yeah, you ban the Raptor. That doesn't really impact the deck in a tangible way. It's like, yeah, that's the best 2-drop in the format, but it also doesn't matter because they have so many other energy generators. The 1-drop that generates energy and gains you life is just insane. So it's kind of like that with the mice package. It's like, yeah, you'll ban Rage, you'll ban a really strong card for the deck, right? But it's like, yeah, we still have Manifold Mouse, which gives Double Strike and Trample. We still have Heartfire Hero, which gets gigantic as a 1-drop. I see games where it is literally a 7/4 on turn 2. I mean, that's just insane. And sometimes it has Double Strike. Banning Rage is just not going to do anything. I don't even think banning Beanstalk will have a significant shift on the format as well. I know that the Overlords deck did win the Pro Tour, and it is a very good deck. I would say, there's Beans, there's the Overlords, and there's like the Esper Bounce deck all at the top. These are, in my opinion, like the 3 strongest decks. But there are plenty of other decks in Standard that are very viable. My face is completely blown out here. There are plenty of other decks that are very viable in Standard. And I think that if you ban, or dismantle the mono red deck and make it slightly weaker in some way, specifically around the mice package, that's going to be the change that we really need to see a big meta shift in Standard. Just slowing down the format by literally a turn or 2 would be fantastic. Because otherwise the format's amazing. It would just bring a lot more room for a little bit more diverse meta. And there are plenty of decks that can compete with Beans that don't even interact with the Beans. For example, the Artifact deck, there's a bunch of variations. I don't think there's like a solid list, but we have Simulacrum Synthesizer in the format and Repurposing Bay. And this combo is actually very hard to deal with in the late game. It's a super strong control deck. We have a blue-white control deck that interacts with Beans very well. And not only is it just running a bunch of counter spells, but has a good end game that actually competes against Beans. Mill is a prevalent deck in the format. So it's kind of like the Beans are actually working against your opponent in that situation because they're drawing so many cards. You're just getting to the Mill plan faster. So my point is that I don't actually think that Beans is a problem card. I think it's actually totally fine in Standard. Yes, it is a very powerful card. I don't think that powerful cards should not exist in Standard. I think that's totally fine that they exist. And people can build around it. But with the red deck, it's a lot more challenging because you need the answers early. That's really the main issue. It makes Surveil lands a lot worse. Makes tapped lands a lot worse. We didn't get really any mana fixing in Dragons of Tarkir that is going to be super relevant for Standard. So it's not like we have triomes or anything. Like we're going to be playing all these tapped lands and pain lands, which makes the mono red deck even stronger against these mid-range and control decks. So that's really my take on Standard. I think that, like I said, if I had to really ban anything in Standard, it would honestly, I would ban Heartfire Hero, Manifold Mouse, and Ember Heart Challenger. Those would be the 3 cards that I think are the most problematic, and that leaves a lot more room for the red deck to actually play other cards besides the mice package and have a little bit more of a creative game plan for what they're trying to do and how they're trying to kill you quickly. There's a bunch of goblins in the format right now. There could be a goblin deck. Boros is actually very strong right now. We have a bunch of cool Boros cards that don't really see a ton of play because the mice package is so strong. So that's my take. Ban something from the mice package, preferably Manifold Mouse and Heartfire Hero. I think those are the two most prevalent and annoying cards. And then you'll see that Rage is actually a lot less good. It's still an insanely powerful card. It's very, very strong. But because you don't have double strike on top of, pumping it by 4, giving it that extra toughness, triggering your mice abilities, it makes it significantly worse. So anyway, that's my take on Standard. I'll have some, videos coming out about Tarkir and draft and stuff like that coming up. So thanks for watching.